Calaroga Shark Media. Hello and welcome to Ghost. This episode is titled The Boy Who Cried Ghost.
From the moment the rickety moving truck pulled up to the secluded farmhouse on Old Hollow Road, young Tobias Merrit knew there was something off about the place. An unsettling miasma seemed to cling to the dilapidated edifice, a silken malaise that set his nerves at edge and caused the tiny hairs on his forearms to prickle with primordial trepidation. His parents, of course, chalked up the boy's mercurial unease to the usual streaks of youthful melodrama. After all, relocating to the rural recesses of Gephardt County was merely the latest in a long string of cost-cutting measures, each one more inconvenient than the last. First, the fancy high-rise condo in the city had to go, then Mum's clutch uptown salon, and finally even Dad's prestigious corporate gig, swept aside in the endless downsizings of the unfeeling modern economy. So when Tobias pulled at their sleeves that first night in the drafty, mildew-scented farmhouse, his eyes ping-ponging fretfully between the creaking oak doors and the soot-stained brickwork of the twin fireplace chimneys, all he was met with was a resigned sigh and a tousling of his sandy blonde locks. "New houses always take some getting used to, kiddo," his father said, forcing joviality through a stream of poorly concealed exhaustion. "Just you wait. In a few days, you'll have made the old place your own personal digs, loud nights and all." Unfortunately, those nights proved to be even louder and more fitful than the young Tobias could ever have imagined. It began innocuously enough, the occasional bump, thump and groan of an aging timber frame dwelling succumbing to the iniquities of wind and seasonal erosion. Before long, though, a series of strange, inexplicable occurrences manifested to plague the Merrit household. Objects began migrating of their own volition, materializing in rooms where they had no earthly business being. One morning, Tobias awoke to his mum's hairdryer and toiletry case arrayed before his bedchamber mirror like some sort of cosmetic armory. Later that week, his dad's prized baseball mitt and cracked Little League trophy somehow ended up soaking in the upstairs toilet. Strange presences seemed to lurk in the shadows of every drafty, low-ceilinged room, an unseen observer whose tendrils of malign regard danced at the corner of the boy's vision whenever he dared confront them head-on. Half-glimpsed, flickering phantasms that dissipated into languid curls of miasma if cast into the direct light of scrutiny. Whenever Tobias alerted his beleaguered parents to the latest in the household's crescendoing catalogue of paranormal violations, he was met first with gentle dismissals, and then, as the strange phenomena escalated in intensity and audacity, outright exasperation and disbelief. "You need to give it a rest with all this ghost story hogwash," his father raged one blustery evening, as their television set suddenly switched inputs to blast a grainy loop of static and indecipherable demonic whisperings. "We've all got enough stress to deal with without you adding to it." The final straw came a week later, when Tobias witnessed the Merrit's decrepit pickup inexplicably start on its own and proceed to slowly peel out of the barn with no one behind the wheel. He watched in horror through the kitchen window as the driverless vehicle made possessed perambulations across the muddy cow pasture that chilly April morning. Panicked, he rushed to his parents' darkroom, where his father had taken up amateur photography as a coping salve. The words came hurtling from his runaway mouth in a sputtering torrent. "The truck! It's driving itself! Around and around the field like some big rusty top. You've got to come see. It's one of those ghost doppelganger engine revenants from Uncle Clive's crazy blog." His horrified recitations were cut short, however, by the resounding crack of his father's spindly fingers impacting his upturned cheek. "That is enough, young man." Despite the decrepitude and destitution gnawing at his once robust constitution, Robert Merrit still cut an imposing figure when sufficiently roused to temper. Once was insecurity, twice a fit of restlessness, but this relentless boy who cried wolf routine stops here and now. As his mother wept softly in the shadowed corner of the dankly lit room, Tobias could only hang his head in abject shame and remorse. Without another word, he was sent to his room, his parents never bothering to check on his wild claim. Unknown to them all, the phantom pickup truck sloughed to a shuddering halt in the middle of the bog-soaked field, as if awakening from a trance, leaving no evidence of its supernatural journey. It was only later that evening, as Tobias was slumped in his darkened bedroom attempting to drown his humiliation and anguish, that he heard the first of the anguished howls ringing out from the farmhouse's dank, subterranean root cellar. At first, the shriek pierced the late evening stillness, like the protracted death whistles of a rabbit snatched by an eagle's talons. Then another bone-chilling cry mounted atop that, and another, until the agonized wails coalesced into an unholy, keening cacophony. Tobias froze, the plastic game cartridge clattering from his suddenly leaden grasp as shafts of delirium-inspired panic reverberated up through the tendons of his ankles and knees. This couldn't be happening, his rattled, disbelieving mind rebelled. It simply was not possible for that type of unhingery to be occurring on this mortal dredge of a realm. When his mother's staccato, glottal shrieks of torment reached their crescendo, Tobias at last summoned the nerve to bound down the creaking, groaning steps to the farmhouse's damp lower levels. He only made it halfway down the musty wooden stairwell when the sight at the landing below stole what little breath remained from his lungs. Hovering about a foot from the dirt-encrusted cellar floor, his father's shriveled, spectral form whirled and contorted in a nightmarishly choreographed cyclone of unspeakable distress. Robert Merritt's decaying astral projection thrashed in a miasmic paroxysm, ectoplasmic fluids shuddering forth in sickly ropes from his ruined spirit maw, with every silent, gaping scream that rocked his insubstantial frame. His mother's limp, lifeless body twitched grotesquely at the whirlwind's epicenter, jerked in profane cadence with the ebb and flow of her husband's disquieting plight. By the time Tobias fumbled for the basement's harsh overhead fluorescence, the grisly, phantasmagorical scene was already dissolving back into the reeking, epiphenomenal ether from whence it sprang. He could only stare in silent, existential ruin at the crumpled, broken doll slumped in the shadows that had once been his mother's smiling, affectionate form, her eyes twin holes of infinite desolation. When the police finally arrived some indeterminable hours or eons later, they assumed young Tobias's catatonic posture among the detritus was the mere shell-shocked remnants of another senseless psychotic break. While the forensic evidence certainly backed up the callous presumption of a grisly domestic murder-suicide, the deeper metaphysical substrates lying in half-formed runes and blasphemous theorems across the boy's subconscious would never be deciphered. For every time Tobias showed signs of stirring from his trance-like stupor, his half-opened lips already beginning to keen and gibber unnameable isocons of preternatural torment, the officer's mind simply refused to process them. Realities, fracturing truths, bending in upon themselves like waves of cosmic anti-radition buffeting their core identities. Soon, the endless feedback loops and contradictions became too much, forcing their synapses to simply erase those half-glimpsed revelations for the sake of preserving what little sanity remained. So in the end, Tobias Merritt's innocuous cries ultimately went unanswered, like so many other solemn warnings dismissed and discarded across the ages. For who in their right mind could conceive of a world where the harmless boyhood tales of things that go bump in the night could metastasize into reality's most profane, inexorable demiurge? The crumbling vestiges of the old Merrit place still remain nestled in the shadow of Gephardt County's twisted pines, looming in rotted silence like some great primordial maw awaiting its next sacrificial ingestion. Local folk have long since steered clear of those blackened, clabbered environs, avoiding the profane geometry of its druidic windows and listing corrugated tin rooftop like a spiritual blight upon the very air itself. On the darkest, most saturnine nights of the rural Gepardtian year, some of the older township denizens still claim to hear the waking echoes of the fallen Merrit family's anguished, beyond eldritch screams riding the icy tendrils of winter wind through the hollow. Stark reminders that some horrors lurk just beyond the veil, patient as a drowned leviathan awaiting mankind's final fateful remembrance before surfacing to drag us all beneath.
Ghost is a Calaroga Shark Media production, written and hosted by Alexander Ian McIntyre, produced by Mark Francis, executive producers Mark Francis and John McDermott. Portions of this podcast may have been created with the assistance of AI.
This show, along with hundreds of others from Calaroga Shark Media, is available commercial-free on any player, hassle-free. Just look for the link in the episode or show notes. Ghost now has merch. Find shirts, mugs, and more with the Ghost logo for sale at our merch store. There's free shipping and 10% off now with the coupon NEWMERCH10. Did we say there's free shipping? Check out all the goods at calaroga.com, that's CALOROGA.com, or just look for the link in the show notes. Thanks for supporting the show, we really appreciate it.
Calaroga Shark Media.